Good morning, Agwini Yushla. Hello, friends. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to our online winter gathering brought to you by the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. Emer Burke here, and I'd like to welcome you all. And just let me know where you're from. Hi, I see from Alberta, Canada, Ohio, Brisbane, Australia. It's lovely to have Southern Hemisphere people at this time to join us. Hi, Alice from Somerset, Northumberland, the Netherlands, St. Lucia. Okay, Minnesota, Switzerland, Belgium, Ireland, West Wales, lovely. Scotland, and I've seen people from France and Spain. Where have we got? Goring, West Sussex, New York, lovely to see you. Derby, Oklahoma, Woodstock. Hi, Ali. And that's just wonderful to see you all. So, Italy, ciao. We've Devon, England. Hi, Ellie. Portugal, lovely. Somerset. It's absolutely wonderful. So, Finland, great. The countries are getting further and wider. It's absolutely wonderful to see you all here. So, let me introduce you to our Pendragon, Dave the Bard. Welcome, Dave.
Hello. Hope you can all hear me all right. Welcome, everybody. Isn't this going to be a great day? Well, hello, everybody. Right. So when we are in Glastonbury at the town hall, we have 200 druids. And I'm just getting distracted by all the comments in the chat. It's lovely to see everybody here already. We have 200 druids in the hall, and they sit in a circle. And at the beginning of our Glastonbury gatherings, I step into the centre of the circle, and I do the Pendragon bit with the sword. And I unsheath the sword with some words, and then I hold it above the heads of the people there, and I cast an Awen around the circle, and everyone joins in with the Awen chant. And we're going to do that to open the day. So, but instead of just being in one hall, we are going to be everywhere around the world. This Awen is going to spread out across the entire planet. It's going to be a beautiful thing and just what we need right now. I know that some of you are members of the order, but some of you aren't, and probably going, well, what's an Awen? And the Awen is the name of the elixir that is brewed within the cauldron of Ceridwen. It is the quest of the bard to taste of the inspiration of this. And it is intoned with 3 syllables, R-U-N. And we do it 3 times. So if you want to listen for the first time, do that and join in with the second and third. So what I'd like you to do to start our day, if you can, and if you're not driving, which I hope you're not if you're watching this, but if you can, make yourselves comfortable, sit down or stand, whichever you prefer, and just close your eyes for a moment. And just imagine all of these people all over the world tuning in for our day together. And wherever you are, on whichever part of this beautiful planet, let's take a long, slow breath with the earth beneath us. And a long, slow breath with the sky above us. And a long, slow breath with the seas and rivers of the lands that you stand upon. Spirits of our circle, spirits of this place, and ancestors and guides of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, we ask for your blessings, your guidance, and your inspiration on this day together. So may it be. Behold this, our Order's sword. Drawn from the lake of still meditation, and returned to it again. Ever sharp, and ever with us, should our lake be stilled. Blessings, everybody. From the Arwen we sing, from the deep we bring it. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And I'll see you tonight for some music at the Eisteddfod. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Dave. That was lovely. Absolutely beautiful. Will I remove you?
Yes. Thank you very much.
But not forever. Okay.
Not
bye.
forever, no.
So, just Queenie Ushla, friends, Achorja, this is our second year not to have our winter gathering in Glastonbury. And who could have predicted this? And yet I'm very grateful that we have this platform so that we can have an online gathering. And that means bringing so many people from all over the world, members and not actually, to join us in community to mark the winter solstice. And I know these past 2 years have been really, really challenging. And they continue to be challenging. And one of the frustrating things for me, and as I'm sure for many of you, is that as soon as we think we've made some progress with this pandemic, along comes another variant or another obstacle to block our progress from moving forward. And I think, fortunately, as Druids, we can stand firm. We can stand firm on the earth, on the mother, and we can be grounded, and we can be centered, and that we can engage with the stillness of this time. And for me, winter is always a time of stillness and restriction. The word restriction has become maybe hijacked by this COVID pandemic, and we have so many restrictions. But somehow we're equipped to deal with stillness and restriction. And the solstice is this time when we stand or sit in stillness and restriction, to be still in this moment, because all we can manage is this moment. Our ability to have a predicted future has been taken from us, and let's hope that's temporary. But all we can do is live in this moment. So I would like to invite you to join me in a meditation. So I invite you to get comfortable in front of your screens, with something firm at your back and your feet firmly on the ground. And if you like, you can close your eyes. So just go within and just begin to focus on your breath. Following your in-breath as it enters your body, and following your out-breath as it leaves your body. Remember, with every in-breath, there are possibilities, and with every out-breath, there's a letting go. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. And now I'd like you to imagine that you're in your sacred grove. And it is nighttime. And see if you can notice the shapes of the trees around you. Although it's dark, you can see the starlight through the trees, and there is a full moon shining above you. Feeling the earth beneath your feet, connecting with the earth, feeling the earth's energy moving up through the soles of your feet, up through your legs, your thighs, into your core, right into your heart space. And with every in-breath, you draw up that earth energy into your being. And then you look above you and see the stars and the moon. And you draw down that sky energy, that star energy, that moon energy. Again, with every in-breath, you're drawing down the energy of the sky right into your heart space. And it is here that the energy of the earth and the energy of the skies meet and move in a spiraling way within your being. Breathing in and breathing out. And as you stand in your grove, you notice a guide who calls to you. And they invite you to follow them along a path deeper into the forest. And it is midwinter, and you can smell the cool, crisp air around you and feel a gentle breeze on your skin. You see the frost glistening on the ground in front of you, and you can hear its crunching sound beneath your feet as you walk. And sense the stillness around you, holding you in this space. And you can sense the magic of the trees all around you. And your guide takes you through a clearing in the forest. And you find yourself out on an open landscape. And the full moon is shining so brightly that it helps you to see the way ahead. And in the distance, you can see some raised ground on what looks like a mound, silhouetted against the night sky. You follow your guide towards that mound. And as you get closer, you see it's an ancient passage tomb. And you walk towards this tomb, and you see an entrance. And you sense a strong invitation to enter this tomb. You stand there, you sense that warm welcome. And it's very, very dark as you begin to walk into that passage. And the night sky and the moon are behind you as you move deeper into the darkness. And you walk very slowly. Along the passage. And although there's complete darkness all around you, you know the way to go. And you arrive at the central chamber. And you can stand or sit in the stillness in the dark, and you wait. Would you wait in quiet reflection and quiet contemplation? Waiting in this silence, reflecting on what has passed and will be no more. And just allow this silence, this stillness, this restriction to envelop you. This year, I do not want the dark to leave me. I need its wrap of silent stillness, its cloak of long-lasting embrace. Too much light has pulled me away from the chamber of gestation. Let the dawns come late. Let the sunsets arrive early. Let the evenings extend themselves while I lean into the abyss of my being. Let me lie in the cave of my soul, for too much light blinds me, steals the source of revelation. Let me seek solace in the empty places of winter's passage, those vast dark nights that never fail to shelter me. And as you sit in the darkness and the silence, you sense a change in the energy in the chamber. And there is light. Light coming slowly along the floor towards you into the chamber, into the womb of the mother herself. And the chamber is now full of light. And you can see the beautiful carvings on the walls of that chamber. Wonderful patterns carved by our ancestors so long ago. Not only is this chamber filled with magical light, you sense this magical light filling you, filling your heart space, filling every cell of your body. This light has been reborn in you. This is the light of hope. This is the light of peace. This is the light of strength, the light of courage. The light of trust, the light of kindness, the light of compassion for yourself and for others. Shiakon is suaveness. Shiakon is suaveness. Peace and tranquility. Peace and tranquility. Deep within the still center of our beings, may we find peace. Silently within the quiet of the grove, may we share peace. Gently within the greater circle of humankind, may we radiate peace. And now it is time to leave this chamber and to return to the ordinary world. You look around the chamber one more time, knowing that you take with you that peace, strength, courage, love, compassion, peace and tranquility to support you and to hold you as you move forward, as the days grow longer and the nights grow shorter, as the new year begins to grow ahead. And may we find hope and trust and resolution for all that concerns us. So you slowly begin to walk down along that passage, out towards the entrance. And you can see the moon shining, and you can see the Milky Way ahead of you. And then suddenly something changes. It's daylight. You're out in the sunlight, and everything is vibrant. There's frost on the grass, and yet the grass is also vibrant, a beautiful green. The frost glistens in the sunlight. And you look back at the passage tomb and see how different it is against a morning sky. And you say goodbye to that passage tomb, and with your guide, you begin to walk back down along that path. Back to the edge of the forest. Back through the trees into your grove. When you say goodbye to your guide and you give them thanks, and they quietly leave. And as you stand in your grove, you give thanks. For the gifts you have received to help you forward in the year to come. And now you allow your awareness of your growth to fade, becoming aware of your physical body sitting on the chair in front of your screen, the floor beneath your feet. Coming back, fully present here and now at this online winter gathering, the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. Begin to wiggle your fingers and toes, maybe stretch. Take a big deep breath in and out. And when you're ready, open your eyes. So, I just before I introduce our speaker this morning, just to do some housekeeping. So we will have David Bramwell now until about 11:45, and then we'll have a 15-minute break, and then we will have Adrian Rook and Joe Dunbar for their presentation at 12. And then we'll have lunch at 1, and then we will have our online OBOD ceremony at 4 p.m. And then at 8 p.m. until 10 p.m. we will have our Eisteddfod. So yes. So somebody asked for that poem. Yes, it's Let Me Lie in the Cave of My Soul by, I'm going to type that in, by Joyce. Let Me Lie in the Cave of My Soul. I'm going to put that in there now. Oh, God. Sorry about that. I keep setting fire to things here. It is one of my favorite. I say it every solstice. I find it so comforting at this time. So, Let Me Lie in the Cave of My Soul by... Okay. So let me introduce David Bramwell. So just before David starts, I'll just tell you a little bit about himself. You're in for a great treat this morning. David, the first time I met him was 2 years ago at the Winter Gathering, the last time we were there physically, and he had got a standing ovation after his performance. So there's no pressure this morning, David.
I won't know if I've got a standing ovation a second time in a row.
I promise I'll stand up. So Dr. David Bramwell is a performer, he's an author and a broadcaster for BBC Radio 3 and 4. And his most popular monologues, The Number 9 Bus to Utopia, which is what we're having this morning, The Haunted Moustache and The Cult of Water, have all toured the UK and have been turned into books and BBC radio programmes. So about David, he's fascinated by magic, philosophy, curiosity, passion and ecology. So it was only a matter of time before he joined OBOD. And in the fine tradition of Dr. Seuss, Dr. Hook and Dr. Robert, he is a medical and academic charlatan. But it does look good in a white lab coat.
Thank you.
So his website, drbramwell.com, is a good place to find out about his work. And his talk today, like I said, the number 9 bus to Utopia, is based on a year spent visiting some of the world's most extraordinary communities and what they can teach us. David, over to you.
Thank you, Una. Okay, I'm going to go to share screen and let's hope that this all works well. So, do we have visuals? I can't hear you, so I'm hoping that's a yes.
mute. So I was muting myself to be polite. Okay. No,
Talk. Mm.
it's not up there. It's
Oh, it's
just
not up
our
there.
back. It is now.
Oh,
I should see.
oh, it is
Yes,
now.
it's there. Yeah.
Is it there
Okay.
now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, good. So as yeah, thank you for inviting me this morning to give this talk. And as Emma said, it was a year of my life, quite a few years ago now, in my late 30s, when I decided to head off into the unknown and explore the worlds of extraordinary and intentional communities around the West. So what led me to do this was it's a cliche, I know, but it was a relationship breakup. I was dumped and replaced by someone my ex described as younger but more mature, a chap called Dougal, a name which partially softened the blow for me. I'd been too selfish, too self-centered, too wrapped up in my foolish projects, and she was right to leave. And to help me get over the heartache, I decided to set myself another foolish project to go off in search of utopia, in search of places that could teach me about how to be a better person, how to be more giving, how to be more sharing. I knew I had a thing or two to learn about compromise and about being with others. And because, as Emma said, I'm the kind of person who's I've always been interested in the unusual, the extraordinary. I'd already researched many of the world's intentional communities out of curiosity, out of fascination, but never imagined I'd actually have a reason or an excuse to go and visit them. But that's what I decided to do. So I scaled it down to 10 places which fascinated me the most and that were all quite different. And I made myself the promise that I would live for at least a month in each one. Even if I didn't like them, I would commit to a minimum of a month to see what I could learn. And if I did find my utopia whilst on my travels, well then why return? Why go home if you found the perfect place to live? So that was at the back of my mind as well for this journey. And I was a teacher at the time. I was given compassionate leave for my heartache. I really was truly utterly heartbroken by the relationship breakup. We've been together for many years, and it was a very short while before she got engaged to Dougal, so that was painful too. So I needed to get away from the house that we bought together, the painful memories of that. So I cashed in my savings. I had was given a year off, as I said. I cancelled my Pilates classes and left an extra large bowl of food out for the cat. And I headed out into the unknown. And the first place I decided to go was Denmark, Copenhagen. Now, I'm sure all of you watching right now will have come across those happiness surveys, the pseudoscience of happiness, I think it is, that often tell us that places like Denmark or Sweden are the happiest countries in the world. So, I mean, that in itself is not a bad place to start if you're going off in search of utopia and alternative ways of living. But it is a bit odd, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure there's maybe some of you watching who are Danish, and my apologies for what I'm about to say next. But having been to Denmark, and anyone who's watching having been to Denmark, the Danes are really not the most obviously happiest people on the planet. They're, I mean, like the British, really kind of quite guarded with their emotions. Everything's quite held in. And when you think of Danish culture, I think of Lars von Trier films like, Melancholia and Dancer in the Dark, or all of the Scandi noir, which has been very fashionable of late. For me, this is a cry for help from the Danes and the Scandinavians. And you go to a country like Thailand, everybody smiles, and there's definitely more a sense of the people there being happier than the Scandinavians. But anyway, I digress. That isn't why I went to Denmark. I went to Denmark because of Christiania, a self-styled loser's paradise, nestled in the heart of the city, an anarchist community that was established in the late 60s by squatters. This is old military land, naval land, 84 acres of disused land north of the river, by waterways, very beautiful area. And it was established with 3 rules, which I believe they still abide by, just these 3 rules, which is no hard drugs, no violence. And the third, which is a bit vague, is if you piss people off in the community, then they'll have to have a meeting about it, which they do every Friday. They all meet in the grate and the old hangar, and try to come to an agreement about things, which is not easy with the principles of anarchism, because everyone has a right to say something and to chip in. But it survives. It's lasted for decades. And testament to the ability to run a community with anarchist principles, and in a city like Copenhagen, which is incredibly organized and clean and kind of gentrified in a way, and Christiania is like the grit in the oyster, the pearl. And I suppose because it was the first place that I went to, I did have this thought that, maybe I would meet a tall, attractive furniture designer, and we'd fight for some worthy cause, and I'd settle down and remain in Christiania for the rest of my life. But that wasn't the case. Christiania was not quite to my aesthetic, if I'm honest. Having spent the 90s going to Glastonbury Festival and other UK festivals, it felt very much like I was stepping back in time. And it's very heavily they're very heavily into dope smoking in Christiania. It's got an edge. I'm sure that, again, there's those of you watching who've been there, and you'll know when you step into Christiania, the only named street, which is the one you can see, the High Street, is called Pusher Street, and got its name for obvious reasons. And down Pusher Street is the Woodstock Bar. Now, Christiania attracts the waifs and strays of Copenhagen. There's a reason why it sort of half jokingly calls itself Loser's Paradise, and this is because these people, it's a safe haven for these people, but of course that brings with it its own problems and difficulties. So it's easy to walk into Christiania and feel unsettled and feel like you don't necessarily feel that safe there, and you want to leave. And that was my initial reaction. Christiania was going through a difficult time when I visited. And it was thanks to a Swedish journalist called Malin that I was saved from getting too wrapped up in the prejudices that were building in my head when I arrived there, and even the feeling that I was just going to turn around and not even venture into the community any further, because I didn't feel like it was a place for me. Malin saw the kind of the startled look on my face, and she said, "You're having the classic tourist experience," because it is a tourist attraction as well. She said, I'm going to show you the heart of this community and what it means. And for Malin, what I really took from hanging out with Malin and getting to love the community as I spent more days and weeks there. One of the things that really struck me about Christiania, and obviously I'm condensing my experiences in this 1-hour talk, so I'm sharing one aspect of this community, and that was the architecture. That was the fact that these people had moved into just a couple hundred people initially had moved into this desolate area in 1969, 1970, I think it was, and certain prejudices might be that from certain individuals might be that a bunch of stoned hippies in the late 60s moving into an area would build their own down at heel shanty town, and nothing could be further than the truth. There was so much pride and creativity and imagination that's gone into the architecture of this community. It's really inspiring. So these beautiful kind of strange hobbit houses, people living in trees, hexagonal buildings. This beautiful house had a glass ceiling, so those living in this house could lie in the bedroom at the top and stargaze at night. A friend of mine said, called it Hobbit Tudor. There's a touch of that, but it's to me it's testament of when people are left to their own devices to build the kind of homes they want to live in and create the kind of community they want to live in. How rich our imagination and our sense of sharing can be. And Christiania brought to mind an old story I came across from the 80s. I lived for a year in Oxford, and I lived quite close back in the 80s, and I lived quite close to this extraordinary piece of outsider art, the Shark House. And some of you know this, some of you won't. There was an American living in Oxford at the time called Bill Heiner. He bought this terraced house and he threw a party, and the theme of the party was, what shall I do with this house? And he said to his friends, whoever comes up with the best idea, no matter how ridiculous it is, I will go with that. And an artist friend of his said, hey, Bill, why don't you get a large fiberglass shark and have it crashing into the roof of your house? And Bill thought that was a brilliant idea and commissioned his friend to do this. And so I think it was 1984, I could be wrong about the year, the residents of New High Street in Oxford woke up to find a crane depositing this shark into Bill's roof. They were very confused. Somebody phoned the police. The police turned up. Bill said to them, is there a law against putting a fiberglass shark into the roof of your house? And the police weren't sure if it was against the law or not. And they went away. And so the shark remained for a while. Well, it never went, but the shark remained, but the controversy grew. The council told him he didn't have planning permission. They suggested a compromise. Why don't you take the shark out and we'll hang it in the local swimming pool? Bill said, you know, you're really missing the point about this as a piece of art. It was a political statement based around the phrase, you know, safe as houses. There was a lot of bombing going on at this time, I think in the Middle East. It was a comment on what was going on politically. And Bill went through the courts for 8 years and spent an awful lot of money, finally won, and was allowed, the shark was allowed to remain. And of course, unsurprisingly, the house prices are higher in the street than other parts of Oxford. It's been the cover star of books like Eccentric Britain. It's been called, you know, the greatest piece of outsider art in the UK. And it still has its odd detractors, but by and large, people love it. They think it's amazing. The council were terrified that if they'd allowed it to happen, then the whole of Oxford would suddenly be peppered with giraffes and elephants poking out of people's houses. Of course, ridiculous. And this, to me, is an example of how hard we have to fight in the West, in most places in the West, to be allowed to express ourselves and bring a little playfulness and creativity to our homes. Whereas a community like Christiania, where people were just given free rein, allowed within this anarchist community to build whatever they wanted, the architecture is truly wonderful and truly stunning. And that's the part of Christiania that I most want to share with you. As I said, I'm limited by time. So I stayed there for a month, but I didn't really get the feeling, I didn't really get the opportunity to get my hands dirty in Christiania, as I've always felt like an outsider, a tourist. It was Findhorn in northern Scotland, an hour's drive from Inverness. This was the place that I went to next, where I had the opportunity to immerse myself in community life. And I'm sure that some of you watching will have been there. Maybe there's somebody watching from Findhorn right now. I don't know. I will share with you the history of Findhorn, because of all the places I visited, I think it's the most delightful and the most idiosyncratic. Findhorn was established in 1962 when these people, the adults in the picture, we've got Dorothy McLean on the left, Peter Caddy in the middle, and Eileen Caddy on the right, and their three boys. The trio were theosophists. They'd been part of the theosophical movement in the earlier part of the 20th century, and one was spiritualists. Eileen claimed that she could commune directly with God, and the three of them were running a hotel in a town called Forres, pretty close to Findhorn in Scotland. And Eileen was asking God for sort of practical advice on how to run a hotel, because they'd never done that kind of work before, and everything was going fine. But then the owners of the hotel got wind of this, and it sort of got bad press locally, and they were all fired, and they found themselves down on their luck without much money, and forced to live in Findhorn Caravan Park that winter. Now the winters can be harsh in this part of Scotland, very windy, a lot of rain. And also the caravan park is next to, or was next to, a very noisy RAF base with jets flying overhead every 20 minutes. So they're in one caravan. They didn't want to stay there. They were planning their escape, but just decided they will sort of batten down the hatches for winter and see through their time there. But Eileen's still getting the voice of God. And my retelling of this story is as Eileen tells it. So I hope this doesn't come across as disrespectful, but it's exactly as they tell the story. Eileen's still getting the voice of God, but she can't hear what God is saying anymore to her because of all of the noise of the six of them in one caravan, the wind and the rain battering against the side of the building, and the jets screaming overhead. So she says to God, I can't hear what you're saying. Could you maybe suggest somewhere quieter that I could go to tune in? And God, being God, did have a good idea, and he or she suggested the caravan site toilets between the hours of 4 and 6 in the morning, which Eileen dutifully did go and sit on the toilet. And it was wintertime, remember, between 4 and 6, so she could hear God's message. And God's words were thus: build a magic garden and they will come. So Eileen returns to Peter and Dorothy and says, look, I know we talked about leaving here, like we didn't want to stay, but God's got other plans. We need to start digging. So as soon as winter was nearly over, they began to work on what they called the magic garden. They began to plant different fruit and veg. And by summertime, word got around the village of Findhorn, different to the caravan park of Findhorn, that this strange trio had grown over 100 different types of fruit and veg. And they'd grown carrots the size of a Labrador's leg, and tomatoes the size of a schoolboy's head, these extraordinary, enormous fruit and vegetables. So somehow word spread around the counterculture. Word got out that this strange thing was happening in this caravan park in Scotland. And it made its way to those in the counterculture in London and San Francisco and other places. And before long, Findhorn became part of the hippie trail. The hippies were going to swing in London. They were going to Marrakesh. They were going to San Francisco, and they were going to a caravan park in the north of Scotland. And they were given spades and tents, and they joined in, and a community grew out of this. It's extraordinary how it grew out of them being down on their luck with no money, and suddenly goodwill and money started to pour in. So by the 70s, they've got enough cash to buy the caravan park they were stuck in, buy the hotel that they'd been sacked from, and also to buy a small island off the coast of Scotland. This is an extraordinary story. And nowadays, it's a flourishing eco-village. Very few of the caravans are still there. You can still go and visit the caravan which the trio, or the 6 of them, lived in. You can visit the toilets still. You can visit Eileen's throne, as they've called it. And you can visit the original caravan, which has been lovingly preserved, along with the plaque, original caravan, which I think in itself may be an original plaque, or one of a kind. And there is some amazing work that goes on at Findhorn now in terms of ecology, in terms of the environment. They build eco houses out of old whiskey barrels from the local whiskey distillery. And I went there for a month. I stayed there a bit longer, actually. I had a wonderful time in Findhorn. And here's a picture of some of the very, very Scandinavian style houses. Ruby Wax recently bought maybe that'll put you off going. I recently bought a place. I'm kidding. Recently bought a place there and is a resident. Mike Scott from the Waterboys is or was their archivist. The comedian Phil Kay lived there for a while. And I signed up for a thing called Experience Week, which wasn't cheap. And I remember at the time thinking to myself, should I be spending a lot of money to go to a community where essentially, I was paying to meet people and join in with activities, but also, to do things like clean the toilets and do the cooking and food preparation. But then I thought, well, how does a community make money? How does it generate income? From people like me. One of the ways is from people like me who are curious about community life. One of the things that I really loved about Findhorn was being reacquainted with communal meals and spending my time having inspiring and random conversations with people from all over the world. And also finding myself looking forward to some of my duties, like the cleaning and cooking in the kitchen. I was being a terrible partner. I'd been very lazy with domestic chores, and I'd left far too much of those duties to my partner, I'm ashamed to say. And I found myself looking forward to it in Findhorn, and I was checking myself, working out what had changed. Had I just miraculously changed after 4 or 5 weeks of being on the road? No, that wasn't the case. It was because there was a group of us in there. I enjoyed the company, I enjoyed the conversations, the jokes, the stories. And it was behind the Universal Hall in Findhorn, another one of their great creations, this beautiful hall where there's a couple of Waterboys albums have been recorded here. Behind here are hot tubs, and I discovered hot tubs in Christiania as well. I really enjoyed going to the sauna and the steam room and the hot tubs in the evenings, and meeting the old timers there who told great stories about the community. At Findhorn, the hot tubs seemed to be underused, undervalued, and so I encouraged many of the people who I'd met during Experience Week to join me there and watch the sunset over the sand dunes. And we would sit there soaking in those healing waters with these beautiful views. And when you're in a hot tubs have a sort of bit of a bad connotation in the UK, which is a shame, because in communities they're an important part of community life. You can't take electronic devices in a hot tub. You can't even take anything paper in a hot tub, and it's not a gym. You're not going to a hot tub to improve yourself or get physically fit or anything. It's just a place where you can hang out and chat with people. It's really nice. And it was in those hot tubs that I encouraged my Experience Week group to come and join me, and we talked and we shared stories over that week. And I found out some harrowing stories from people. There was someone there who was getting over the death of her 16-year-old daughter in a rock climbing accident. There was someone there with terminal cancer. There was someone there who, like me, was going through a huge amount of heartache and pain. And at the beginning of Experience Week, we've all done these things where you start in a room with a bunch of strangers and you sit in a circle and you introduce yourselves and you say who you are and why you're there. And I remember looking around the room at these people and thinking, these are nice people, but they're probably not my people. I'll have a nice time with them, but I don't know that I'll necessarily connect in the way that I do with my hip groovy friends in Brighton. Again, prejudices kicking in. And by the end of the week, I felt great love and compassion for every single one of these individuals. And it was because I took the time, we all took the time to listen to each other in the hot tubs, during the activities, during the times cleaning, cooking. And I realized that is actually it's one of the simplest and most effective ways of building compassion and empathy for each other is taking the time to listen to our stories. And you probably knew that already. This was a lesson I had to learn. But of all the places that I visited, the most extraordinary, the one that I would encourage you to go to out of all the ones that I'm going to be talking about in this lecture is Damanhur in Italy. Damanhur, I've been to several times now. I find it utterly fascinating, and also a place in which they have constructed one of the most remarkable buildings in the world, which we'll come to in a second. So these are the Damanhurians. So Damanhur is based in the foothills of the Alps, about an hour north of Turin, and was established in 1978 when a small group, as they were then, of 28, decided to start digging into the mountain to build something extraordinary. And for 23 years, they dug and they built, and it was never intended for the world, for us to see. I was in a nucleo. And for Findhorn, I stayed for a month in Findhorn. I largely slept on the floor of a yoga teacher for the remaining weeks in Findhorn. I had a beautiful time in Findhorn. And they have a thing called, did you get the Findhorn magic? Did the magic happen? It did happen for me in Findhorn. It didn't happen through anything supernatural, anything extraordinary. It was, as I said, it was that building of compassion, understanding of how we build compassion through taking time to be with others. And this happened in Damanhur as well. These are the beautiful people who I spent a month with, living in a communal house called a nucleo. And if I was to say to you, who do you think was the bad boy of the group? You could probably identify Carl in the white vest and the sunglasses, who was a Belgian punk who had come to Damanhur because in a acid-soaked dream he'd been told by Dolphin that his destiny lay in Damanhur, and he came and joined us. And he was a hard drinking, heavy smoking rebel, and was difficult at times because he didn't want to play by the rules. And if it was Carl's turn to cook, he might decide to just be somewhere else. He might be too drunk to cook. But we loved him because he was such great fun to be around. And I saw reflected in Carl's behavior some of the selfishness which I displayed in my relationship. There's nothing like community for others kind of showing you your vulnerabilities, your weaknesses, and the areas that you need to work on. I have him to thank for that, and I don't have any judgments for his behavior, because he was who he was. And they were a beautiful bunch of people. I lived with them for a month, and we were there to learn about the community. Now, in 1978, what the Damanhurians began to build was the world's largest underground temple. And the reason they were building it, I will come to in a minute. But this temple was constructed without any professional knowledge. Now, just like the people of Christiania building their own houses, they weren't all qualified in house building. They just learned how to do it. The Damanhurians, going one step further, built this extraordinary temple. And again, largely done with goodwill and largely done at night, because they didn't want to get caught or be spotted by anybody. But I'm going to come back to that. I'm just going to plant these seeds there, and I'm going to share the full story of the temple with you in a second. But before that, I'm going to introduce you to salamander olive and hobbit watercress. And I love this photo because there's kind of like old school Italian in salamander olive's attire, and then hobbit more of the kind of the classic community crushed velvet onesie and bum bag. Both beautiful people, and both of them having animal and plant names, because if you visit if you live in Damanhur, if you commit to Damanhur, you eventually earn the right to a plant and animal name. So you might meet people like sponge strawberry, goat carob tree, swordfish banana. Some people sound like Jamie Oliver recipes, if you know Jamie Oliver. And there's a lovely thing. So you earn your names, and you can suggest to the community the name you'd like to have, but ultimately it's chosen by a committee. So they like to tell a story about a guy there who was a very alpha male, and he said to the community, from now on, I wish to be known as Panther Deadly Nightshade. And to teach him a lesson, they named him Dung Beetle Pansy, and that is the name which he still goes by. So you meet amazing people with amazing names. And of course, if you go to Damanhur, you have to ask yourself, what would you like to be? So if I ever do commit, I will be Chaffinch Coriander. I think that would be my Damanhur name. The Damanhurians are an extraordinary bunch of people. They're a nation of builders. You can see in the background an open temple which they've created. There's a lot of ritual goes on in Damanhur. It's sort of a potpourri of spirituality. They honor and celebrate all the gods and goddesses, and they have a lot of fun doing it. They have a university, they have schools, they build eco houses. They seem to do well for money, or they did the last few times that I was there. They're quite out of this world. In 1984, they released a 7-inch single by a rubber plant called Heli. They claim to have harnessed the musical ability of plants. When I was there, Heli was on tour, so I got to jam with this plant. I'm embarrassed to say that I can't remember her name now, but the plant was all kind of wired up to these crocodile, they're called bulldog clips, into boxer gadgets, and then music sort of emanates, and you can interact with the plant, stroke the leaves, and get soft music. Or if you wanted to be sadistic and poke it with a pair of scissors or something, the music gets all kind of angular and sort of John Zorn. In 2015, they took a plant orchestra to the Chelsea Flower Show. I'd love to have been there to see what people made of it. But I did say that I would share with you the story of the Temples of Humankind. That's what it's called, the Temples of Humankind. I'm not going to say it was completed after 23 years. It was discovered after 23 years. The temple continues to be built. It continues to expand. And there are 9 separate spaces which they built over the space of 23 years, and then another 25 plus years on top of that. And it is equivalent in size to St. Paul's Cathedral. It is truly extraordinary. The first time that I saw it, I went on a 3-hour trip around the temples. When I came out, I just burst into tears because I couldn't believe what an extraordinary thing that they created. This is a labyrinth on the far left, which continues to grow. There's the Guinness World Records as proof. So if you go, they got blackmailed in 1991, which is why they had to come clean. They had to put a few safety features in, like a lift and an escape route. There's now a little gift shop there. But if you go, you'll probably take the lift down into the bowels of the building, of the temple, and you'll come out and you'll see the most extraordinary spaces like this. You can see just the top here. This is also the world's largest stained glass coloured cupola. So 2 Guinness World Records there. The corridors are all decorated with hieroglyphics. This is the Hall of Earth and Stars. I mean, it's very colourful. I was saying about the shark being an extraordinary piece of outsider art. This is arguably the world's greatest piece of outsider art. Now, because it was all built in secret, if you had stumbled upon the temple, not that you could have done, but if somebody had sort of broken in, this would have originally been the first space that they went into, and the intruder would have seen that there was no other door and presumed that was it. But you'd have to know there's a secret button in the wall that you press, and all these stairs unfold, and they take you down into the next space. You get into the next space, which is the Hall of Earth and Stars, and you can see there's no other door. You can't see any of the steps in the floor, so you might think that's the final space. You'd have to know which stone slab in the wall to press. You press it and the entire wall slides by, revealing the next secret space. This is pure Indiana Jones. It's bloody extraordinary. So some more pictures. This is the Hall of Spheres. This is a photo of the labyrinth. This is their technology in Damanhur, which they claim comes from Atlantis. These are Selphic devices. Oh, and this is their time machine. I forgot to mention the time machine. I forget to mention the time machine. They forget to mention the time machine. If you ask the Damanhurians about the time machine, they will play it down and say it's not very important in the great scheme of things. You might disagree. I certainly disagreed. So what I've shared with you is the most extraordinary building, I think one of the most extraordinary buildings in the world, and all built with goodwill. And then the Damanhurians claim that they've built a time machine, which may just spoil everything. Because you're thinking, well, this sounds like an amazing place, but I'm not sure I believe they've conquered time travel, in which case, is it just the case of another crazy community with a extrovert leader, etc., etc. And I did think that when I got there. And there are all sorts of extraordinary stories that fly around Damanhur, that Falco, who was the person who started the community in 1978, is an alien from the future, and that they have harnessed these extraordinary energies from Atlantis. I don't really buy all this stuff, and I'm not sure many other people do. And so what do you do with that? What do you do when you visit a place and you love the people and you find the architecture and the way of life extraordinary, but you can't really buy all these kind of daft stories that they claim to be telling about themselves? Well, this is they have a former member called Gorilla Eucalyptus who claimed to have traveled back in time and ate some blueberries in a magazine. Well, before my month was out in Damanhur on my first trip, I was lucky to be there. Butterfly Sunset Pineapple, who's one of their key people, showed me these books that they'd had printed, Le Story de Damanhur, and I said to her, it's this complicated story about time travel and Atlantis that you can kind of see from the pictures, particularly the one with the boy and these selfic devices all exploding out of his desk. Very Harry Potter. And you read these, and they claim to be, kind of the story of how the community began and what the point of the community is for. Sunset Butterfly Pineapple said to me, when she translated the title, she said, "The Myth of Damanhur." And I said, "Not the story, not the history." She said, "No, the myth. We don't expect that people take our story literally here. What we're creating is a mythology that is meaningful for us." And I thought, my God, not only have these people built the most extraordinary structures, these temples for their rituals, but also they've constructed their own mythology, a story that resonates and is meaningful for them. Here's some of the pages. This is when they get raided by the police, and this is almost somebody's stolen the battery from the time machine, which makes me think of 1970s kind of John Pertwee Doctor Who. And I'm a big fan of the writer Joseph Campbell, who was a mythologist. I'm sure many of you will know. Campbell wrote The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and in an interview in the 80s for a TV series called The Power of Myth, he said, "In the 20th century, we have dismantled many of our myths because they no longer serve us." He's referring to myths of dismantling, referring to myths of patriarchy, myths of fascism, myths of religious dogma, etc. But he ends with a caveat, and he says, "What the world needs desperately right now are new myths to live by, and I just don't see them." Now, Campbell collaborated with George Lucas extensively to construct the myth of Damanhur, using the hero's journey for the story of Luke Skywalker in the first film. And we all know how powerful Star Wars has been as a myth, and how powerful it continues to be as a myth. And yet, it's just a film. It's just a. I mean, I know it's left the screen now. It's more than just a film. But it began as just a film. We desperately need new myths in our world, and of course, being part of OBOD and the need for more ecological consciousness on the planet is that's why one of the reasons why I joined, why it's important to me, why more people I think are being turned on to this, and for a community to construct their own mythology and to inhabit that mythology means that the Damanhurians are living in a myth. They've created a living myth, which may be unique on the planet. I can't think of anywhere else. Maybe you could. Maybe in the Q&A you might be able to suggest somewhere. But where they are living inside the story that they've created, and every day it gets richer and more meaningful for them. And it is one which is wrapped up in ecology and preservation of the planet and biodiversity. So it's an important myth. And I came across this book only a couple of years ago by Alex Evans, The Myth Gap, in which he talks about how issues like climate change need more storytelling, need more myth around them for us to remain engaged, that facts aren't enough. And Damanhur describes itself as a laboratory for the future of humankind. So of all the places I visited, I would say that Damanhur is the one I really heartily recommend you go and see for all the most extraordinary things, not least, of course, the temples of humankind, and to meet these people because they're brilliant. And you can fly to Turin, you can stay in accommodation there, you can have a 2-3 hour tour of the temples of humankind. And, you know, if you're the kind of person like me who spent much of my life thinking, should I go and visit the pyramids in Egypt, or will it be too touristy? Do I want to go all the way to Egypt to see the pyramid? Oh, I don't know. Well, I would say don't bother. I mean, the pyramids also past their best, right? You know, they're kind of dusty and crumbling, and they've been plundered. And you will have a very touristy experience, I'm sure. Go to Damanhur, go and see the temples of humankind. You're seeing the 8th wonder of the world, and the paint is still drying in that labyrinth. You're seeing the most extraordinary sacred building, and you'll be pretty much on your own on that tour because the good news about Damanhur just has not got out. So I need to take a little breather there. Those are some of the places that I visited in Europe. I restricted my year to only traveling around the West. And that is principally because I'm a nervous traveler. I'm not an adventurous traveler, and I'm terrible with languages. So for me, to go to places where I couldn't communicate and wasn't going to easily pick up a new language was something that I didn't really want to do. So I did restrict my travels to the West. So I did spend a lot of time in America. There's some amazing places in America to visit. Esalen, I'm not really going to focus on Esalen because we are heading towards the end of the talk. I did visit 10 different communities. I visited free love communities. I visited ashrams, none of which are featured in this talk. Esalen, some of you will know, is based in Big Sur, California. I flew to San Francisco. I visited co-housing communities in San Francisco. And then the first place that I went to see was Esalen. Esalen is, of all the places that I visited, people said which one was closest to paradise. This place, Esalen was heaven on earth. Damanhur is the place that I would say you must go and see it. Esalen was the one that I found hardest to leave for all the obvious reasons. It was a sort of spiritual paradise, and they have got hot tubs that are perched on the cliffs overlooking the Pacific. The food there is beautiful. The people are beautiful. You're surrounded by giant redwood forests, monarch butterflies, these great swarms of monarch butterflies and hummingbirds. And this is a place that was developed in the 60s by this guy, Michael Murphy, who inherited it from the family, his friend Dick Price. And after they finished at university, they'd seen Aldous Huxley lecturing. Huxley moved to California in the late 50s, I think, and began lecturing around the area and saying that what the world needed right then was a center for developing human potentialities. And they decided that that's what they were going to do with their hot tubs, or Murphy did, with the family hot tubs. And Esalen, I'm sure, again, many of you know, Esalen Institute became incredibly famous by the 60s as a place where yoga and meditation was being developed in the West. Fritz Perls was there, so Gestalt therapy, primal scream, psychedelic therapy. It was all happening, all being pioneered at Esalen. What an amazing place. Hunter S. Thompson was its caretaker. Initially, a young Hunter S. Thompson, before he'd ever had anything published. He was. They recognized even then that he was a gun-obsessed lunatic and a good person to essentially be the caretaker, because the place used to get overrun by biker gangs who'd go there for orgies, for drug-fueled orgies. So they needed somebody who was a lunatic to try and discourage them from turning up, which Hunter S. Thompson successfully did, and then wrote about them at a later date. I had a very, very happy time in Esalen. I did not want to leave, and it was in this in this hot tub on the last night that I was chatting with one of the old timers who didn't live in Esalen but lived in the hills nearby, and he said we'd got to know each other, and he said, "You look a bit down in the dumps, David." And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to an ashram tomorrow. I've got to spend 4 weeks with a very hardcore regime. There's no physical contact allowed, and it's kind of chores every day, getting up at 4 a.m. Esalen, really is a kind of a paradise in terms of like a holiday park." And he said, "Well, you don't want to stay here too long. You don't want to get all wrinkly in these waters, and you don't want to end up like half the old bastards who set this place up and used to work here." And I said, "Well, why not?" And he said, "Well, look around you. All of this beauty on tap, nothing to fight for. Many of them simply drank themselves to death." And it was very interesting to hear that and be reminded that life is about, one of the things that gives life its vitality is struggle. And I think about, I remember thinking about many of my parents' friends who did the classic thing back in the 80s and the 90s of retiring to the south of France or retiring to Spain and thinking that was going to be, the perfect life for them, but without community, without things to fight for, that sense of isolation, if they were living out in the country somewhere, they very quickly turned to drink because they were bored. I spent a lot of time researching and thinking about utopia. And there's that David Byrne line, heaven is a place where nothing happens. And our ideas of utopia are ones, imagining in a place of peace, of harmony, of perfection, of happiness. And yet really it's the journey to, it's our journey and our struggles to try and get there that actually I think is the true utopia. It's the journey, not the destination. That old cliche. Anyway, I spent a month in Esalen. I don't have many stories for you because it was too nice. I did spend an afternoon with some of the cast of Buffy the Vampire Slayer in that hot tub, which was pretty nice. And then I went to an ashram for a month, and that was hard, but also very rewarding. The last place that I want to share with you, I'm going to keep an eye on the time as well. The last place I want to share with you is Arcosanti, which was a city being built in the Arizona desert.
30 minutes, David.
Okay, thank you. That's perfect. Arcosanti is a city being built in the Arizona desert, which in many ways is even more ambitious in its scale than Damanhur and the other places that I went to. And over the months, as I was visiting and staying in, living in these different communities, I really enjoyed the experiences. I think I'm quite a gregarious person, or try to be. And I found that the lifestyles, sharing with others was agreeable for me. I really like it. But I was missing in places like Damanhur and places like Findhorn. There was something missing for me, and it was the heartbeat of the city. It was the diversity of culture. It was that sense of being in the heart of something. And I realized that I probably am a city boy at heart. That's where I like to be. I feed off that. And I spend a lot of time in the country, a lot of time in nature, but I like the balance. And Arcosanti being a city being built from scratch, it seemed to me, well, this was in some ways the most interesting of all the places to visit, because this was an attempt to create a community with the elements of city life. Like all the places I visited, it began in the 60s or 70s. I think 1972 was when Arcosanti began. It was an Italian architect, Paolo Soleri. It was his dream to build a city for an optimum population of 5,000 people living on marginal land, living in an ecological way, in a city with no street names, with no need for vehicles, with a lot of community sharing, communal meals, etc. And he managed to build about 7% of it throughout the 70s, and then everything kind of ground to a halt. They ran out of money. But what's there is pretty extraordinary, and the buildings have a real kind of futuristic quality to them. And I was there for a month, as with everywhere else. And Soleri became a bit of a hero for me on my travels. Of all the people that I read, all the people I encountered, Soleri seemed to be a real visionary. He wrote lots of books. He wrote a book called The Urban Ideal. The opening of The Urban Ideal starts with the words, the city designed for intercourse, the city designed for human intercourse and discourse is our appropriate habitat. It is a mistake for us to live alone. And those words resonated with me, at least. And I found Soleri really inspiring and incredibly pioneering in his approach to how we live. But Arcosanti didn't quite equate with that. So there's, you can see from the picture, the concrete's already starting to go a bit rotten, if that's the right word. Does concrete go rotten? And the structure's a little bit brutalist, reminiscent for me, in part 60s university campuses that were built like Sussex University, close to where I live. And only about 100 people living there. So not a sizable community compared to other places that I'd been. These were the rooms that people lived in. They were, I mean, it's hot as well because it's in the Arizona desert. And I discovered bizarrely that all of the money that was being generated to pay for the expansion of the city came from the gift shop, from things like these bronze bells, which were made by Soleri. There wasn't any money coming from anywhere else, which seemed bizarre. And I remember speaking to the person in the gift shop, and they said, "Well, this is Soleri. He's a purist. You know, this is his vision. He doesn't want any interference coming from the outside world." As a consequence, they were only able to build one flat a year. So his ambition of reaching a population of 5,000 was going to be incredibly slow if they could only incorporate one extra person per year. It seemed like money was the elephant in the room with this community. And I had the chance to interview him. I explained that I was on my journey and I was researching community. I had an idea about writing a book about it, which I did. And I was granted an interview with Saleri. He was very old at the time. He was, I guess, in his late 70s, I think, maybe even in his 80s. A lot of vitality. But and the whole community was invited for this. I thought it was just going to be a private Q&A. So I go along, I sit down with Saleri, and my opening question is, I say, I've only been here a few days. I'm greatly impressed with your ideas, your visions, and with Arcosanti from what I've seen, but I'm confused about finance. I understand that all of the money for the city comes from the sale of bronze bells. Have you considered other means of generating, raising money, which was a concern for other residents there? And he looked at me and he said, you understand nothing of my vision. You've barely, you've only been here a handful of days. I have nothing further to say to you. And he stood up and he walked out, and I never saw him again, which brings to mind the old adage, never meet your heroes. I was kind of crushed by this and felt very humiliated. But then after he left, it seemed from the conversation in the room that many of the residents echoed the same concerns. And so it was with a sense of disappointment that I left Arcosanti. And by this point in my journey, I'd been there nearly a year traveling. And I decided to visit Death Valley. I went to Vegas for the day, and that was horrible. It was just horrible. When you've spent a year living with people in communities that they're proud of and living together, living with purpose, and living with heart and integrity, Vegas was just too much. I managed 24 hours and I hightailed it out of there. And I went to Death Valley, and it was here at Devil's Golf Course. Right, I sort of stopped the car and got out and was overcome with homesickness, and realized that it was time to return. And within that year, I had exercised a lot of that heartache and pain. And so that was something that had transformed within me, that I could return home and not feel as I did before I left. And also, I'm sure you've read the Paulo Coelho book, The Alchemist. That old cliche of the thing you were looking for was on your doorstep all along. I started to think about Brighton during that year and think about what an amazing place I lived in, how bohemian it was, how welcoming, how accepting, how diverse it was, how creative. And it had a beach, and it had just a beautiful population of people. Anything goes in Brighton. I loved my hometown of Brighton. Shouldn't that be my utopia? Shouldn't that be the community that I would want to live in for the rest of my life, rather than going on this journey and trying to find it elsewhere? Well, you might be thinking that as well. But when I returned to Brighton, I was hit by the stark reality of how we live in our towns and how we treat our towns and cities and how we treat each other. This is a photo taken after Bank Holiday weekend in Brighton. And it's shocking and shameful, but this is what we do. And we're all guilty of this, of just expecting that somebody else will clean up our shit. That, to come and sit on a beach and have a picnic, have a barbecue, bring your food, and just not think twice about leaving it there, and that someone else is going to pick that up for us. And why do we do it? We do it because we don't think of our cities and towns. Many of us don't think of our cities and towns as being our homes, our communities, a place that we should have pride in, and places that we should look after. Someone else does that. And the bigger the town, the bigger the city, I think the greater the sense of anonymity and loneliness we have the potential to feel. We know that depression and anxiety and loneliness are real killers in the West. And that sense of anonymity that people feel in cities is very, very real, not least for what's happened over the last couple of years. So I came back to Brighton, and I do love the town, but I also came back to an empty house, which was hard, and a hungry cat. And I decided to throw a party, invite all my friends, and bring that sense of community back into my house, at least for a night. And all the while in my head, I'm thinking, what can I do? What can I do to hang on to those experiences that I had, all of which were enriching, all the places that I went to? How can I bring that into my town, into my own life? I live on a street of 10 houses, and I've lived here for 17 years now. But all the years that I'd lived there before going out on my adventures, I didn't know the names of any of my neighbours, any of the houses. I knew them all to nod hello to, but maybe being British, maybe being too private, whatever reason, I'd never knocked on the doors and introduced myself, and they'd never done it to me. So I didn't know my neighbours. And when I came back to Brighton, there were these posters around my neighbourhood for a thing called a zocalo, which is a Mexican word which describes the areas where open areas in Mexico where people naturally hang out with kind of friends and family, communal spaces outdoors. And this American called David Burke, living in my neighbourhood is called Hanover in Brighton. He decided that people spent too much time inside their homes, glued to screens, not communicating. And he came up with this simple idea of setting up an event called Zocalo, and to encourage people to put a chair outside their home for an afternoon and an evening and just sit on it as a way of saying, I'm a friendly neighbour, come and have a chat. And he ran a poster campaign. He knocked on doors, he put posters up in pubs, he talked to people, and he ran this campaign, and it was a huge success. Hundreds of people came out and they sat on their streets. There's no commitment really other than just being there, giving it a go. And he ran it twice during the year that I was away. I learned this at my party, I should say. Sorry, my friends at the party were saying, hey, there was this amazing event in the neighbourhood right up your street, forgive the pun. You should, get involved with that. And I thought, brilliant, that's just the kind of thing that I could do with participating in or helping with. So I waited for the next Zocalo to happen, for the posters to appear. I kept a lookout for David Burke. I found out what he looked like, and no sign of David Burke, no more Zocalos. Months went by, and I discovered that tragically, David Burke had children and moved to nearby Lewis, and would be sleep deprived and out of action for the rest of his life. That's not true. And I tracked him down, and I said, "Look," I told him who I was and the journey that I've been on, and I said, I heard about your Zocalos. They sound amazing. I know you're a new dad, and I know you're sleep deprived. But what if we join forces and maybe get these things going again? Which is what we did. And I've worked before with a friend, Lisa Holcroft, who's a local illustrator, and she made the posters for us for free for a Zocalo. And somebody kindly set up a website for us where you could download the poster for the Zocalo and the how to get involved section and the video. And on the day of my first Zocalo with David, we strapped a small boy to the roof of a car, and we didn't do that, but and we drove around Hanover playing Mexican music out of a loudspeaker and yelling at people to come out of their houses and join in. And they did. And these are some of the photos that I've taken. You can see the poster in the window there, like supporting a political campaign. These are photos I've taken over the years of these neighborhood events. And it was so amazing to feel like I'd found a way to bring that sense of community and neighborliness and sharing from my experiences into my own life. And I can't take credit for the idea because it wasn't my idea. It was somebody else's idea. And I think it's very interesting that it was an American living in Brighton, because sometimes it takes outsiders to show us, to lead us, to tell us what we need. And if you're watching now and you live in a village, you live in a community, then you know this stuff already. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but you might be watching and you live in a large city, you live in a tower block where you don't know the neighbors, or you live somewhere where there's a sense of transience and you can never get to know people because they're always changing. You might be in a house share, which in itself is a form of community and can be also a form of hell if you don't get on with each other. These are the pros and cons of community life. But I think that in the West, we need more of this, not less of this in our lives. We need to share more. And again, particularly with what's happened over the last couple of years and the sense of isolation that so many people went through, that these kind of activities, and of course it's COVID friendly. I mean, it's winter here in the UK. So it's not the best time of year for doing it. We always ran we always ran Zocolos in September. It felt like a good time when the school holidays had finished, so people probably weren't going on the summer holidays anymore, and we still had good weather and good light, and that seemed to work really well. So these are pictures taken, and also with the exception of this one where they blocked the streets illegally. In running these events, because we're just asking people to put a chair outside the house, we don't need council permission. There's no red tape, there's no bureaucracy. There's a couple of meetings and some posters printed, and we're away. We use a local directory called the Brighton directory, Hanover directory, to put the poster in as a center page pull out, so you can just stick it up in your window, so it goes free to thousands of houses. You meet a cross section of the community, people of all different ages, going out, having their dinner, playing games. Don't know what you're drinking, it was the first opportunity I had to meet my neighbours. So this is a picture taken from the end of my street, and I know all of these people really well now, and we have a WhatsApp group for the street. We share things, we look after each other's pets, we share cars, we share tools. We often get messages, saying, has anyone got any balsamic vinegar, which appeared last night? Very middle class, very Brighton. Have you got any hummus? But I feel like I live in a community now. I feel like there is a sense of neighborliness and community in the street that I live in. And I missed that in my life. And I think many of us miss that. And I think that the selfishness that I'd displayed in my relationship, I'm not alone in that. I know that we throughout the 20th century we fought hard for our individualism, for our freedom, for our rights, for self-expression, and I think that everything comes at a price. And selfishness is something that we have almost encouraged ourselves to be, and it's something that we need to be guarded against. And I hope and I feel that I've changed. I'm in a new relationship now, and I hope my partner would say that I am a thoughtful person some of the time. We're still working on these things, but those are the things that I really learned from my adventures. And people sometimes say, did people feel happier in the communities that you visited that compared to city life? And I have to say yes. I have to say that because those people had by and large chosen to be in the places that they were living in, there was a greater sense of pride, greater sense of sharing, and enjoying the life that they had that they created for themselves. And this was the most. These were the words that stayed with me during that year, that was spoken to me by Julia, who's this wonderful woman that I met in the community of Findhorn. And I love the sentiment of this, because how many of us feel disappointed with our governments, with our political affiliations, and the reminder that it's just us, it's just each other that we pin our hopes on, and that we invest in, not any system, not any ways of thinking, but just in each other. And I think that's a beautiful sentiment, and that is those are the words that I'm going to leave you with, and finish my talk with. And if you've enjoyed this and you'd like to read more, because I've barely scratched the surface with this, I did knock out a book called The Number 9 Bust Utopia, which covers all of the communities, and I think Ema's going to share a link as to where you can get that from. Please don't buy it from Amazon. There's better places you can buy it from. You can buy it direct from my Bandcamp page for a start. But anyway, I don't want to start doing the hard sell there. So I will stop sharing and hand over back to Ema and see if anyone has any questions. And I hope you've enjoyed this talk, and thank you so much for listening. It's very weird talking to a screen and not being able to see anybody or have any feedback. So I hope it's been entertaining and interesting. Thank you.
Wow, David, can you just go back to the previous screen with that connection? Because you didn't give me the link for the Bandcamp.
Okay.
I did put your website into that one. So if people can, I can't copy that.
Can you see that?
I think people can see that. Yes, I can see it.
So I have a band called Oddfellows Casino. And if you go onto the Bandcamp page, Oddfellows Casino. In the merchandise, I've put the number 9 bus to Utopia if anyone's interested, and I can personalize it and send it to any part of the world. And what's lovely about Bandcamp is it's that Bandcamp give 85% of revenue to the artists, whether you're selling music or t-shirts or whatever, which is, you know, with Amazon you get about 8p, and also it goes to Amazon. So it's really nice to be able to sell it at a place like this. So hopefully that's enough time for everyone to see it.
Well, there's a lovely lots of reaction. You have a standing ovation. Sorry, you have to get one from me. But there's some of the scream. I mean, a lot of people are saying, I live in Birmingham, I'm going to try this. I'm fascinated with the Zocalo, because it's one thing to hear about these wonderful communities like Damanhur and Esalen, etc.
Yeah.
And they're over there, and it's just, what do we do here? I mean, you've created magic on your own street. I mean, I live in the country, so I can't text anyone and say, have you got any balsamic vinegar, because I have to get into the car to go and find it or get on my bike. But that you have managed to just create that so simply. I mean, with a chair.
Well,
they're very complicated.
It's the beauty of it. And quite a few years ago now, Tim Smith, who set up the Eden Project, he set up this thing called the Big Lunch, which had a lot of funding. It was a brilliant idea, and it was a similar venture, but it was about cooking a meal and eating out in the street with your neighbours. And we all know, I mean, those who are watching who live in the UK and many other parts of the world as well, this will apply to. Sometimes it's just know it's going to piss with rain. You know, like, it doesn't matter what time of year you choose. You know that the day that you choose, you know, you're all going to go outside and have your street party, it's going to rain. So what I loved about David's idea, what I love about it, is that you can have a plan B. You can say, look, if it rains this Sunday, we'll do it next Sunday, because all you've committed is a bit of time to sit outside with a chair. You haven't made a lavish spread and organized all of this stuff, and it's all rained off, and what a nightmare that is. It's you know, people take music outside and hang little fairy lights, and they'll take food as well sometimes, and games, but it's entirely up to you. And also you can pimp yourself out to other streets. You can go and see, you know, who else is around in your neighborhood. And so, you know, people will say, oh, I came out in my street and there was nobody there, so I wandered to the next street and there's a little cluster of people, and I just went and sat with them. And also I found over the years there's a lot of goodwill. There's particularly a lot of goodwill in young people who want to help people in their neighborhoods. And they know that, we all know that if you go bang on the door of a stranger, to expect them to welcome you into their lives, and you say, look, I live at so-and-so, I really want to help, I've seen you struggling with blah, blah, blah. You need something, you need an excuse for a bond to be made with that person first. And Zocalo is such a great way for those bonds to be made, so that you gain that person's trust, and then you know that you can actually do something more practical to kind of help them on a daily or weekly, whatever basis. So it was like the sitting in the hot tubs experience as well. Just you sit, you talk, you share stories, you learn about each other. It builds the compassion and the empathy, and it helps strengthen communities. And yes, as you say, where we live, not about going. It's not about I need to go over there and build my utopia over there. It's like, you know, we all live. You know, we live according to our means. Some of us live in amazing places, some of us live in very small places, but you know, what can you do to improve the quality of your life and the lives of others around you on a practical level?
I think so. And because there were a number of comments earlier about utopia where nothing happens and it fails and it's not realistic. And then there was that question of cults. And I mean, somebody had put in Liz Pierce, Damanhur looks amazing. But how can we build something like that? This was an earlier question, rooted in British mythology. Now, whether Zocalo can be rooted in British mythology, but I think this is a lot of people did mention they want community, but they don't want to live with people. So I like living where I am, but I like that sense of community. We'll say with my Druid community, you know, I don't want to live with people in a place, but because I like my independence.
Yeah.
But this idea of the Zocalo is that you can be where you are and have a community. And then you haven't got an ideological leader or a charismatic leader to cause all sorts of hassle. And
yeah. And well, also I should say one of the most interesting things that was said to me during that year was it was in one of the hot tubs at Findhorn, and it was one of the founders, one of the co-founders from the 1970s. Well, I mean, it wasn't one of the trio, but it was someone who'd been there for decades. And he said to me, "Do you know, David, what this community needs right now is a damn good crisis." And I thought that was, I thought that's so interesting because you know, you're gonna, if you've never been to Findhorn before and you go and you know, why are you going? You think, well, I'm going because of the peace and the harmony, and I want to be part of community life and away from the hustle and bustle of the city and blah blah blah. And there you've got one of the founders saying, "Oh, this place needs a kick up the arse. You know, it's stagnating. You know, the population's getting too old." And there are, as one of the, from what you read out, you know, there are common problems that arise with communities, and stagnation is a big one. And so wanting to invite chaos, you know, and struggle and conflict into a community just to shake it up a bit is very telling. Yes, it is. Damanhur is the only place that I encountered that had really found a way to tackle that head on, and it's brilliant. And I mean, talking about bringing mythologies into our own lives in the city, Damanhur created this thing called the Game of Life, where they looked at other communities and they said, this is a common problem. Stagnation is a common problem. What do we do with stagnation? Okay, what we'll do is we'll play this huge game of benevolent Big Brother, where every nucleo is spying on every other nucleo. So each nucleo communal house is watching another communal house. And if they think that those people, it's usually about 20, are getting a bit complacent, we're going to ring up the Game of Life people. So the Game of Life people will receive a call, and Nucleo 26 says, the people in Nucleo 28, the last few months, they've just spent the whole time getting stoned and watching repeats of 6 Feet Under. You know, like, they're really not pulling their weight. And so because they've signed up to be in Damanhur, they have to agree to this. The Game of Life team turn up and they set them an amazing challenge. And they say, you now have to leave your Nucleo and we're going to set you a challenge. And some of the things that they've done, they built an entire village of tree houses, which are stunning. And they live in these tree houses. And that was a challenge for a community who were, you know, just, you know, needed a bit of a kick up the arse. Some other people were challenged to live wild on a mountainside, just given a handful of tools and things. And some of them remained there for 2 years because they loved the experiment. Another community or two communities were challenged to wage a positive war on each other, a constructive war. So they challenged each other to who could build the best pyramid. So I love this idea. You know, it's game playing, really, and challenging, you know, challenging each other to different tasks. If things are getting a bit stagnant, I like that. We can do all that.
There's some mixed reactions here. That game sounds horrible. That sounds horrific. Sounds like surveillance mechanisms. And then somebody else says love it. So,
of course, you've got to be, you know, you've got to like that kind of thing. Yeah, of course.
What we have to end now, but it's that you say the people signed up. You know, it's an agreement, and
yeah,
you know,
there weren't any places that I went to where it felt like anyone was coerced into do. And of all the places, Damanhur probably was the one where there was the sort of the greatest evidence of it being the vision of one person who had, you know, who'd said, this is the kind of community I want to build, and this is why I want to build it. But sadly, he died 7 years ago now. I was one of the last people to interview him for a Radio 3 program, which is called Time Traveling in the Italian Alps. If people want to listen to a Radio 3 documentary about Damanhur. And the community continues to thrive after his death. So it didn't all collapse.
Which is often the case.
Yeah, which is often the case.
We have to end. This has been just amazing, David. I really, really enjoyed it. And I knew I wasn't going to be disappointed. And I know from the comments that our viewers are not disappointed as well. So, and I look forward to more performances from you in going on into the future. Thank you so, so much, David. It's been
My
just
pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to the rest of the day.
Okay. I'm just going to stop you and whatever it is, close you. And then I just want to say goodbye to take the break. Okay, everybody, that was just a wonderful session, and we're going to end this broadcast, and then we'll be back on at 12 midday for the next session. So enjoy a cup of tea, dinner, drink, glass of wine, depending on what time of day it is, a coffee, and we'll see you in another 15 minutes. So till then, slán go fóill.